Hey, what is going on? And welcome on inside yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every show, we talk to the experts and get their expertise and their advice on the ever-changing digital social marketing landscape. This show is no different. Episode 90, as I bring in the two Katie's, KDG. Okay, I call her KG, not KDG. KO, that'd be kind of weird. That's like knockout, right? KDO.
I am a knockout. You can say that.
There you go. KG, appreciate you as always. But KG, we have episode number 90. So before I reveal the next guest, we will do the damn thing, which is an athlete who has worn number 90 in their career.
I'm going to give you more options than last time because I feel like lately
last time you didn't give me an option. You
one.
just chose it. Yeah.
Okay, so we have Jason Pierre-Paul, TJ Watt, and Al Harris. I tried to go all over the place for this one.
Is it bad that every time I think of Jason Pierre-Paul, I think of firework accident? That's tough.
I did think of that myself.
But still a stud to come back and play really well after the accident. Okay, so let's go TJ Watt. I mean, isn't he pretty much what? I mean, it's like JJ, TJ, and Aaron Donald. I would say probably top 3 in the league. So.
Also that family, the genetics,
how? It's hard to follow. It's hard to follow JJ Watt, follow your brother, but I think he's done a pretty darn good job over there with Pittsburgh. So, all right, the TJ Watt podcast. As far as our guest goes, we will bring on the manager of social and earned media over at the Microsoft store. Lance Trube will join us on the program. Of course, a brilliant intro from the great Judah here at STN Digital. So shout out to Judah for making the connection. Judah was formerly at the Microsoft store, so he worked with Lance and said, hey, you got to talk to Lance. This guy knows the game really well, and we'll break it down. I'm really excited to get into really the DTC part of this whole thing, and especially when it comes to Facebook and this whole Google cookies and terms of use changes and iOS updates. It's harder, right? It's harder to get in front of your target consumer. So I'm interested to see how they've gone about that and maybe found some more organic ways to get in front of more people without having to rely so heavily on paid media. So I'm excited to talk to Lance, of course, the manager of social and earned media over at Microsoft Store. All right, so let's bring him on. He's the manager of social and earned media over at Microsoft Store. Lance Trube joins us. Lance, thanks so much for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, David.
So let's get right into it. I would love for you to let our listeners know just all that you oversee over at the Microsoft stores, social and earned media. So you got 2 buckets you got to oversee.
That's right. That's right. Excited to talk about it. So I oversee the Microsoft Store social media, influencer marketing, and PR team on the digital stores side of the house.
Awesome. So talk me through, I guess, the North Star for the social accounts, because obviously there's a lot of different ways that you can touch your consumer, but we'd love to just speak about maybe some things you guys have been working on in 2022. And also I want to go back to COVID in a little bit too, but I'd love to just kind of hear what you guys have been really focused on this year and what you're seeing across your landscape.
Yeah, well, I think, it's important to set the context that being the company that we are, the size that we are, the footprint is just enormous. And so each social team really has to have a charter, a remit, and focus to make sure we're not cannibalizing each other out there as Microsoft on these social channels. For store, we are really trying to be that front door to Microsoft, the best that the company has to offer. We think we can tell stories about whether it's Surface or Xbox or Windows, all those come together for our audiences on store social. And so for us, we've spent a lot of energy in the past 12 months thinking about what are the features that are available today, what's coming tomorrow that help us achieve that mission the best. And maybe the way to capture it is more than just selling. We talk about our vision as being helping build that next generation of Microsoft fans.
I love that. So that's very interesting. So there's so many different Microsoft accounts. You have your folks at Xbox, your folks at Surface, you have Microsoft Store. So, I mean, logistically, how do you guys even know exactly what everybody's kind of focused on to make sure there isn't that overlap? Because I'm sure you might even be bidding against each other sometimes when it comes to paid media and client acquisition.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there is a village that helps make this place run from a social operations perspective. So we have a fantastic community of social leads across the company. If I just zero in on social, Same with comms though. I mean, every product team has a comms group that's out there doing incredible work. And so all those teams spend a great effort looking ahead together, coordinating, whether it's a product launch or an announcement. And so I would say that's one of the strengths of Microsoft, that we work so well together. And you'll hear us talk about this a lot when you speak to different people internally, but the language of one Microsoft. I mean, the days of old where maybe there was some competition internally, those days are gone. And now we're trying to show up as one company to the world.
That's really interesting because I think, a lot of umbrella brands don't have that type of synergy, or I guess don't have that type of communication where they're just like, hey, we're all under the same INC or LLC, but, do your thing and we'll look at the quarterly earning reports at the end of the deal. But that's pretty awesome that you guys were able to speak at a higher level. That way you're not going on top of each other for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, so much credit for Satya Nadella, his leadership, changing that culture. And I think it's really taken root across the company.
All right. So talk me through this concept of humanizing your brand, because there's a lot of different tentacles I think we can go off on that. But you mentioned that when we were talking before the show. How do you guys approach that? What's that mean to you internally?
Yeah, I mean, retail is always changing, right? And so for us right now, one of the big priorities is understanding how it is that we can take the best of what happens in person in retail and bring that online. So we offer one-to-one personal shopping appointments, personal setup appointments, and whether you're a mom and trying to figure out which Xbox console to buy, or you're a student trying to figure out which laptop to get, like, it's complicated. And when you just start your search on the internet, you can end up in affiliate links. You don't know who's saying what's honest. So we see this trend where people want to hear directly from the manufacturers, from the makers of these products. And we see the opportunity to, I don't know, put a name and a face, that one-to-one connection, to recognize that, David's shopping needs are different than Lance's. And so let's schedule time when it works for you and talk that out.
So how much of your job has to do with, I guess, online DTC, and then obviously promoting the store and in-store purchases from a retail standpoint? Like, what would you say the percentages, and how do you attack both those different buckets?
Yeah, so today the physical footprint for Microsoft Store, we have experience centers that were formerly flagships. So we have Sydney, New York, and Australia. And those are incredible places just to get up close and personal with the product, talk to experts. There's experiences there that are really incredible. My efforts are focused on, I'd say, primarily digital.
Okay.
I'd say 99% digital. So we're thinking about how it is that we use our earned and owned channels to, spotlight either products, solutions, bundles, combinations of those things, whether it's a seasonal campaign, like we're in back to school season now, or preparing for holiday or our product launch.
What's working for you right now for back to school?
Oh my gosh, you're probably hearing this all over the place, but for us, it's letting students speak for themselves. So we're talking to college students, letting them talk about what it is they need for their school season. And obviously school looks so different now than it used to. So we've got creators that we're partnering with, and we're excited to hear their perspective on this, but kind of giving the platform over to them. That's
awesome. So I want to get into the influencer side of things, because obviously from a social media perspective, we've been talking about on the podcast for so long, TikTok, Instagram Reels. It really is this more raw talent facing content. Also, there's a lot of studies out there that say that consumers trust, influencers and trust people that they follow, maybe more so than a flagship brand, because of course Microsoft is going to say that you guys are amazing. But you mentioned influencers at the top, and obviously that earned media approach. But what have you guys seen be successful that way? It's genuine and authentic to your brand, but also produces results on the back end too. Yeah, well, one of the things I love about my role right now is, in one body of work, I'm talking about how we can get the attention of commercial audiences, small business owners. And so we're partnering with people. We recently partnered with a small business owner who owns a bakery, and she's an influencer, and she had a chance to talk about what tools and technologies did she need to get her business up and running. And then the next minute, we're running an entertainment sale on anime content. So we're working with a cosplay influencer who's kind of doing some just incredible, interesting things with costumes that I never knew about before I started, researching this project. But different ways in to talk about the products, the sales, the moments. And so we found that, whether you're calling it influencer marketing or community commerce, like having the opportunity to get the brand out of the way and let people who are a part of these tribes, these communities, talk about these products and solutions in authentic ways is really meaningful. What would you say? I mean, from an organic standpoint, that works as well. But from what converts in terms of more of your paid campaigns? Have you seen that those influencer campaigns and those things can be some of your highest performing in terms of conversion? I think oftentimes people get it mixed up where, oh, this is a paid piece of creative versus organic piece of creative. And it's like, well, if it works organically, it will work paid. It doesn't have to be different. But how have you utilized influencers or more of those ambassadors, I guess, to actually drive results in the store?
Yeah, it's such a good discussion. So for us, we're seeing a lot of the creator work perform well as ad content. So we will commission influencers to produce the creative for our ad spots. And I'd say that's unique to some of our work as a social team. We also, the nature of sitting on an integrated marketing team, which I do, we have our paid media friends who are running display and search, and they buy social differently, but they're taking cues from us. And one of the opportunities we see that we're still unlocking is how to retarget the maybe above the line marketing that happens with more mid funnel, social, like that our team produces around engagement, inspiration, education, and then to circle back and get that bottom funnel result as well.
So I'm going to use a bad word. The bad word's Apple. But I think, in the, I think, they've obviously done a good job throughout the years of kind of creating this feeling or this idea of like, it's an Apple product. So whether it's cool or it's sleek or what have you, when you guys look at the North Star of Microsoft and how you want your buyers and your consumers to feel about the brand, what is that North Star for you guys? And I'm sure you've had a lot of success getting there too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very lively discussion for us. We know that we are one of the most valuable companies in the world, but when you hold us up against competitors, frenemies, competitors, they're have, in some cases, they have more of an emotional connection. And so for us, we are thinking about how do we get better telling the story of how Microsoft improves your individual world, maybe simplifying technology, making things easier, but also the role we're playing in the larger picture of the world. Like Microsoft has taken on some really ambitious initiatives to make the world a safer, more secure place. And so, I would say we are just doing something different than the Apples and the Googles of the world.
Yeah.
We joke internally that, we don't work here to look cool, but to make others cool, like to be a platform to provide tools and technologies that help others shine. And I think that's a common ethos you hear from
well, I think I would put you guys more in the bucket. I interviewed the folks over at Luxottica Oakley. Luxottica, obviously, they own Oakley and Ray-Ban, like Fendi, like two like very separate brands. When you look at Apple, obviously you have the iPad and the iTouch and the iPhone. It's a little bit easier, I think, to brand because everything's kind of the same. You guys have, the Surface and Xbox, and these are by itself Fortune 500 companies potentially. When you look at those individual brands. So when you look at like Microsoft obviously is the umbrella, but then you have the individual products, or maybe like me as a kid growing up, I have an attachment to Xbox 360, all that different things. So you kind of want to lean on that, right? From product to product, but also you have to weave in the whole Microsoft halo effect as well.
That's right. Yeah, and that's been the joy and the passion for our team, is to think about how to do that for younger audiences in particular. So it's not uncommon in our research to see that a younger consumer does not make the connection between Xbox and Microsoft.
Right.
Doesn't know about Minecraft and Microsoft. And so how is it that we are introducing ourselves in ways that connect to their passion points, that show those things you love to do out in the world? Like we are a part of powering that. And build those relationships that way.
How important, I guess, to put your marketing consulting hat on, maybe outside of Microsoft, how important is it for me to know that Dasani is a Coca-Cola product or that Xbox is officially a Microsoft product? Like from a marketer standpoint, is that important to make that connection? Is it sometimes okay to kind of have a separate one and you don't really care how the focus group cares about it? Like, how do you approach it when there's just different, I guess, feelings about different products?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think depending on the business goals, you would approach that differently. For us, we recognize that affinity and connection to brands, that loyalty is built so early. And so if we want to see a relationship change with Microsoft over time, showing that that you already trust and love and enjoy and use products
I love that.
that are under that banner
Yeah.
is one way in. It's not to say, hey, you don't know us. It's actually, you know us, but maybe not in a way that you expect.
Yep. Yep. I will say though that I don't think Meta should ever put a Meta on their Instagram home screen, but that's a whole other thing. It depends how I guess how you know, not valuable, but how popular your brand is before you start plastering over everything. How when you talk about influencers, do you guys have ambassadors as far as seeding product and things like that you trust and rely on like quarter to quarter, or does that change just based on results and based on the different campaign?
Yeah, it does change. And I'd say for the largest, you know, for this conversation, we'll call them macro influencers. For the largest relationships we have, you know, it's important that we manage those a little more centrally. So there's groups within the company that have those relationships, and we try to funnel asks through those teams. But then there's a whole swath of, you know, creators out there that we can go and build relationships with on our own. And so we've been doing that. We've been doing that on our own separately.
How have you been able to leverage, you know, like the NFL partnership in the past, obviously, and then, you know, with celebrities and things like that, like from a social standpoint, how do you enter those conversations, or like when you have those different partnerships, what comes off across the most authentic or works for your audience?
Yeah, we get to benefit from the halo effect of those, you know, those stories. So whether it's telling the story of, again, small business owners or athletes, those are usually campaigns about creativity or passion or productivity. And so we get to, as the store team, drift off those and draft off those by retargeting on the media side, or just amplifying on the engagement side and thinking about, you know, fun ways in. There was a time where we would have, you know, events, and obviously COVID changed a lot of how that worked. But we find that there is success depending on the type of assets that were created. But more and more, I think it's the smaller names that can have just as strong of an impact. I mean, really, like I mentioned earlier, that whether it's a sale we're running for anime content using someone that you've never heard of, but their content is standing out in your feed, that can be just as meaningful.
I'm sure it hurts your guys' heart too when Belichick or Brady or Rodgers throws the Microsoft tablet down on the ground after a bad play. Hey, be careful with that. You guys have really done a good job too on the anime and, like you said, gaming communities. You talked about that a little bit earlier on. What's worked well there? Like how you've been able to unlock and be genuine, because that's an audience that you can easily misstep and then forever be tainted as a brand that doesn't get us.
That's so true. You know, I think early on at Microsoft Store, my opinion would have been, my guess and hypothesis would have been that our success in the entertainment space would be the blockbuster titles and the big, you know, the biggest names. So when we started to get traction on the anime side in that community, I was pretty surprised. But I think it comes down to incredible community managers who spend time in these discussions online and are not showing up with ad messages. They're showing up with, you know, fan messages. They're speaking to fans as fans, and they're showing that they understand the storylines, the drama, the character arcs. And so we've been able to see some, you know, really fun moments, like engaging with an anime community and watching that spread from, you know, Twitter to Reddit, for example. Or we have this program, one of my favorite programs on the team is personalized creative, where we will see David tweet at us and maybe we'll send you back a custom piece of creative. And we've watched people in the anime community use that piece of creative as their avatar.
Wow.
We've seen things happen where, you know, a fan will have their friend respond to that tweet and say, this is your new profile image. When you call me, when you text me, I'm using this. So to me, those are important touchstones, you know, with a retailer that you don't normally see. And it all started with just this kind of authentic interaction around anime.
No, I love that. I think oftentimes like the deeper connection is built from, like, I don't know, spending 30 minutes on a custom graphic for one single user or one single customer. But for the rest of their lives, they're going to attach Microsoft to that, you know, thank you for doing that. Or I can't believe they reached out or highlighted me, which is so important, I think, in social, but not enough, especially at the big brand level. They're like, oh, that doesn't work at scale, or let's not spend time on that. Let's not spend money on that. And then you kind of wake up 10 years later, like, why don't we have any loyal consumers?
Yeah, you got to have that balance of both. So we do a few that scale and a few that don't.
So I know you were at Microsoft prior to the pandemic and through the pandemic. And I always ask this question because I think as marketers, our entire careers changed during that period. What's the biggest thing you learned during that kind of carried its way past pandemic too? Because I mean, every brand, right? I mean, I know you guys were DTC and obviously you had that strategy, but I'm sure it was thrown into fifth gear pretty quickly. And some of those things I'm sure have stayed true to this day.
Yes, yes. And, for us, the moment people stopped coming into physical stores, you obviously have to reevaluate, like, what are you going to do there as a retailer? We had always, and just for some background, the Microsoft Store has several storefronts. So we have the store online, we have the store on Xbox, the store on Windows. And so it just allowed us to step back and look at where consumers were going to engage with customers, and consumers were going to engage with us, and optimize that direction. So for example, we didn't have personal shopping appointments online before the pandemic, and now we do. So you can schedule that and you can get support. Personal setup was something you had to be, in person for before, but now that's available online. So I think it challenged us in some creative ways that have lived on, and we think are difference makers
and
for
then
business.
Personal setup, is that like actually a real life human, like on a Zoom call type thing?
That's right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
A Microsoft Teams call.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, good point. I forget you guys own so much. I forget that I'm stepping on your toes here.
With you.
That's awesome. So yeah, I'm fascinated with how an entire population was educated at scale on how to, utilize their webcam and utilize calls like this. And that from your guys' standpoint, they're like, well, even the 80-year-old grandmother probably knows how to fire up a Teams call, and we can actually look at their living room and have them show us their Ethernet box. I mean, that's a big deal from a customer service standpoint.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what the Microsoft brand team has done too on social during this time. They were able to sort of, make fun, participate in the fun that happens when the whole world has to learn how to do video calls, and you live on these video calls, and the things that can happen there. They do this sort of slice of life moments that happen in this new world. And so there were just new ways to engage as brands and as, product teams across the company on social that came from this, like creating those relatable moments and not being so precious about, can we talk about the brand of the product in this way?
Yeah. I've been waiting to have a guest on the show the last couple episodes, because I wanted to ask him this question. I know with like particularly the iOS update, but just the different terms of use with Facebook and advertising, it's a lot more difficult to pinpoint. And I know like customer acquisition costs are going up. So I'm sure you, like every other brand, have felt that. Any ways that you've combated that, or maybe some other channels that you've turned on to kind of like, anytime there's pain in business, sometimes innovation happens. So I'm just curious if you guys have seen anything that has helped that situation and or opened up new avenues to get in front of customers.
Yeah. Shout out to all the marketers who've lived through these landscape changes, right? You wake up every day like, what is going to change in my job today?
COVID, terms of use, like no big deal. Yeah.
No big deal. And so I would say for us, we had already been on this path of trying to take advantage of, we'll call them like native commerce features. And that's been one solve for us. So when we turned on Facebook and Instagram shops with the native checkout experience, that was our toe in the water to find new ways to show business impact from social. And it's really not even just about getting revenue from that channel. It's about what are the signals that we're going to see that show our people are interested, they're in consideration mode, they're in education mode. So, for example, last holiday, one of the things I'm most proud about was we were looking at a moment where it was the 20th anniversary of Xbox, with a new Halo Infinite title coming out. And we had also just launched social commerce features. And so we were looking at this as an opportunity to test out a CTA to purchase a console via this new marketplace, something that was still not very common. And so what we decided to do was, to celebrate the 20th anniversary, we hosted a live stream at the Halo Museum on campus. We got people who were involved in the creation of the game, incredible creative directors and some team members, and they hosted this kind of conversation about Halo. And at the end, we did a surprise drop where you could purchase in the stream a Halo limited edition Series X console. Smart. And those sold out immediately. And for us, it was this opportunity to reflect on, drop culture and native selling features on social, and tying that to, timely moments in your marketing calendar. And so we know we're not capturing, lightning in a bottle every time like that, but we're trying to make sure we have moments that take advantage of the features, the product schedule, that sort of zeitgeist moment, in addition to this evergreen drumbeat of, selling.
Well, I also feel like consumer behavior is almost thirsty for that. I mean, the old appointment view content, right? I mean, with Netflix and the binge model, and anytime you want, you could log on at 1 a.m, buy whatever the hell you want. I do think I've seen the pendulum shift a little bit where people enjoy like the, hey, this is dropping at midnight, or hey, this type of event is going to have a special surprise, because we've kind of, as a culture, we get everything we want immediately, and it's a very instant gratification culture, that when you kind of could surprise people with that, that's what Nike and Jordan and the colorways, that they've just like played that model throughout his entire drop too.
Yeah. We've seen that too. I think the balance for us has been, when you do have something that's exclusive, hard to get, you also have to watch out for the resellers, right? You want these to get into the hands of real fans.
Watch out for bots.
Yeah. And so that's something we're always on the lookout for.
You obviously, especially on the Xbox side, you have a lot of partners. You mentioned Halo, Madden, Call of Duty that are on your devices. Any fun in your career? Any fun cross promotions that you've done with your different partners that just went over very well and got a ton of engagement?
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, we have great relationship with the studios, both the first party and third party. And I would say the ones that are probably the most successful are coming straight out of like the Xbox social team. So if someone's not following them today, follow them. I love some of the custom consoles and things that you see there. But yeah, the store team usually is amplifying those rather than driving those.
Obviously we have the Instagram and the Twitters and the TikToks, but the kind of ancillary platforms like the Reddits, the Discords, have you played in those areas at all, especially when you're talking about trying to reach the anime community or try to get into different corners of the internet? Have you guys like gone into those lanes yet? If so, any success you've seen there?
Yeah, I'll say we're watching, we're trying to find our moment. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin with the resource. I know every team struggles with this, right? Like, where do you put resources and bandwidth? But we do want to have an experimentation plan that lets us dabble in some of these communities. I think it's really fascinating to watch like you said, the Discords, the Reddits. And I remember even my early days of social, watching like what NASA was doing with SoundCloud, for example, and like the sounds of rockets, and just how do you look at each platform and say, what's the unique opportunity, the competitive advantage we have that someone else doesn't?
I like what you said there, and I want to pause because a lot of you listeners out there that are marketers, you got to understand what Lance just said. We talked about like width versus depth, right? It's like, sure, I love what Discord's doing, and a lot of you jumped on Clubhouse immediately too, and Clubhouse kind of fell off, right? So we all have limited social teams. We all have limited time. You can't be everywhere. I always say this too, Lance. Like, I'd much rather be at 99% across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook than to be at 34% across 9 different platforms, right? So I like what you said there, because like, yes, we're watching. Like, if I had double the staff, I probably would be there more. But there's only so much time in the day for us social marketers, right?
My goodness. I think, and I've had both the pleasure and I guess it's double-edged sword, the challenge of watching social go from just kind of this awkward kid in the marketing club, right, to now like the business, like right at the business table and at the center of it. And with that though, as we talk about career advice, like I would say, if you're young, early in this business, there are endless shiny objects, but understanding what's important for your business, what success looks like for you and your leadership teams, and showing that you're delivering on that before you go and spread yourself too thin is really important. That said, if you do have an experimentation plan and you know what you would do when the resources become available, that goes a long way. I mean, we were able to turn on a live stream program in the past year or so and experiment with that because we had a plan in mind. We wanted to see what social selling across live streams looked like. And we were able to do that partly because we knew that was next in line.
I think too, people get way too self-conscious about, hey, if Microsoft Store wants to launch a Discord and try one thing this week and then not touch it for 3 months, like, it's not that big of a deal. I don't think people think they're going to scroll back in time and judge you. Like, can you believe Microsoft Store posted this TikTok 3 years ago and how lame it was? Like, play in the sandbox, have some fun. Don't feel like you have to come up with a multi-million-dollar launch campaign for each and every platform, right?
That's so true.
I love how you guys have approached this. I've been asking a lot of brands this, and I think it's evolved over time. But we talked about us marketers, right? We've gone through COVID, all this terms of use and these different updates, but also let's not forget all these different world events that have happened, right? And there's a lot of social pressure for every human and every brand to make a grand statement every time something happens politically, overseas, like any type of tragedy here in the States. How have you guys navigated that? Because I'm sure it's kind of changed from, let's say, COVID or 2020 all the way to today. But I see a lot of brands are kind of expected to say something when maybe it's not their place.
Yeah, and I have loved what some of your previous guests have said on this show too. So to build on that, maybe what I would say is, it sends a signal when you participate and when you choose to be vocal.
Yeah.
It also, I think, sends a signal when you choose not to. And
amen.
There's value in not participating every single time.
Yeah.
You need to make sure there's a foundation there, for what you're saying and when you're saying, how you're saying all of that. But also, one of the things we talk about as a company is like, collectively, our presence, our footprint on social is big and we are loud.
Right.
There are probably moments where the world doesn't need to hear from Microsoft on social.
Yes.
During a crisis. So like, what would it look like to develop? We have some principles around just maybe we should pause for a while. And we've spent a lot of time over the past few years saying there is business value to pausing. There is meaningful work to be done to decide when and how we're going to turn things off by design to let other conversations on social take that spotlight. Yeah,
I love that, because I think pausing is just, having grace for the moment, allowing people just to like deal with whatever's going on with, because it could seem not disingenuous, but out of touch if you're, trying to, have a Black Friday sale, whatever it may be during a national tragedy. But I totally agree. And I think I've came a long way on this too, where there's the event happens, which could be tragic and terrible in nature, but then immediately the focus becomes on who posted and who didn't post. So if there's a big political event that you don't agree with or whatever it may be, instead of like marching and fighting for that cause, you're now marching and fighting against brands that didn't say the right thing. It just seems like it can get really messy. And I agree that
distraction,
distraction. I agree that like if you say too much every time, then you can be then judged. Why aren't you saying something now? And unfortunately, with the well, let me ask you this from a social media perspective too. Your team is on social with these different events that go on too. I always tell my team, like, any mindset coach or therapist would tell you probably to get off social during these times. So I guess from a leadership standpoint, a teammate standpoint, any things you guys have kind of found to just like support team, mental health, all those different things that go into our day-to-day?
Yeah. And I mean, I have a lot of kudos and applause to give our leaders internally. We talk about at Microsoft, we have a couple of principles for managers of people. 3 of them are just coach, model, and care. And like, in moments of tragedy, we really got to dial up that care side, and make sure that people feel cared for, that the business can pause for a minute. We can talk about how you're doing, recognize that people aren't showing up as, robots to do their jobs, and they have real things. So we've spent a lot of time over the past couple of years thinking about how to care for our people. I think particularly social practitioners have it rough. I mean, you're in the trenches. You see the best and worst of human nature play out on these feeds.
Especially on Twitter.
Oh my gosh, especially on Twitter. And so just, I think working with your team to say like, what do you need? How are you doing? That goes so far.
I totally agree. All right. So I got some rapid fire questions here for you. I'd love to get your thoughts on any brands, accounts, any creators that you personally follow on social that you get value from or are entertained by or just want to shout out?
Yeah, I would say, so maybe 2 categories here. One, I think for sounding like their fans, which is something I'm always looking at, Netflix and Spotify, I think, continue to be so consistent and not just being like the marketer side. The other group brand I would say is Formula One, like their official handles. The idea of maximizing content comes to mind. Like they're using race audio, they're using footage, media clips, and they're just kind of getting a whole second life cycle off of some of this content and fresh.
But also too, that the content that was on Netflix, like I feel like was marketing 101 on how to change perception and just gain a following. It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
I love it. Any brands that you think do a good job capitalizing on trends? I think some brands make the mistake of every pop culture moment they feel like they have to say something, but anybody in particular, maybe any some moments that you guys have kind of done that was authentic and felt like laddered up to you?
Yeah, there's so many these days.
Yeah.
I would say I continue. I mean, Oreo is kind of the OG in this space. Like
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
think they do a nice job in playful ways that are true to who they are. For us, I mean, we I think there's so many that we turn down. Partly is just like
Yeah.
the cost benefit analysis we
Yeah.
play out in our mind. But like we love things like badly explain XYZ, just
Mhm.
playful trends that we see, and there's so much opportunity that we see week to week for those.
I love it. Any book, podcast, and newsletter that you consume and enjoy to be a better marketer, kind of keep your thumb on the pulse of the crazy changes?
Yes. So on the, one of the newer newsletters I've enjoyed is from actually Morning Brew and what
Yeah.
they're doing with Future Social. I think Jack being a voice in social for a long time has been doing a good job with that newsletter. The other, this is kind of more just like a leadership book, but one that I think shows up for marketing is Essentialism. So Greg McEwen has a book where he just talks about, the importance of prioritizing. And I think that's been valuable for me as both a marketing person and a leader.
If somebody came to you and said, "Hey, Lance, where do you think the undervalued attention is right now on social and digital for any brand to be able to like put some more time in, more hours, more strategy into, where would you say that is?"
I think community building is one of the basics, but I think getting back to community building, and that can look so many ways. It can be user-generated content, ratings and reviews, but particularly in my space, I would say I'm always looking like who is doing a great job out there, just building not just consumers and customers, but communities.
I love that. I mean, with the brands that we work with, I would say that when I look at the end of the month of the highest performing tweets, almost all of them sometimes are the community management tweets. And I think, your fans feel like you're in on the joke with them and you're listening to the same tweets.
Right.
And especially if you're in that ecosystem where even from Microsoft Store, like if you're playfully talking about the Xbox or Madden or different partners, it definitely gives that humanized thing that I think you guys are looking for too. Internally, any tools, resources, apps that you couldn't live without?
Ooh, that's a good one. We have a bunch of first party tools that I love. Right now, our team just went through this whole exercise. We're using something called Planner and thinking about how to prioritize our work. And so if someone's on Microsoft 365, you can check that out yourself. But
nice.
Love Planner, love the To-Do app. Those get me through.
All right. And finally, a lot of people would love to work for a major brand like Microsoft and be in a seat like you. Any advice for folks that are trying to get in the industry or try to be successful marketers at a large brand like Microsoft?
Yes, gosh, I pinch myself, feel so lucky to be in the seat that I'm in. I would say looking back, if you're early in career, just getting loads of real world experience.
Yeah.
For me, there was, grad school as part of my journey and kind of figuring out how to move into this industry. And then just in general, like no matter what role you're in, I'd say like being a learner, cultivating a learning attitude, because even when you get to that next position, showing up as someone who doesn't just kind of clock in and clock out, but is aspiring to grow, contribute to the broader team. Those would be just some top pieces of advice I would offer.
Love that. Lance, thanks so much for joining us on the program. And I promise you next time we chat, we'll be on Microsoft Teams. I want to be a man of word here. So I got you.
All good. All good.
But thanks so much for dropping the knowledge on the folks. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you, David. It was great to be here.
All right, there it was, Lance Trube, the manager of social and earned media at Microsoft Store. Have had a really great stretch here the last 3 or 4 episodes or so on the podcast. Not that we always don't have a good stretch, but I will say we went into different buckets of information. We started with Tom over at Overtime, really going after that Gen Z younger audience, what works on TikTok, how he partners with brands. And then we went with Leslie over at Univision. How do you really target that Hispanic American audience in a very unique and authentic way? And then Lance, from a DTC standpoint, a huge brand like Microsoft, how do you make that connection with your consumer and feel like you're a fan with your consumers instead of this big, Fortune 500 companies? So really, really having some fun here on the pod and hopefully giving you guys just a lot of tidbits in so many different corners of the internet that can help your brand and help your careers as well. But some great stuff on that standpoint. And I kind of thought of it, KG, during the show, but I think Apple, for instance, has a little bit of an easier job because once you know Apple, once you know the iPhone, it's really easy to understand the watch and understand the iPad and the MacBook. It's a little more difficult, right? When you're like in a Microsoft, when it's like Surface and Xbox, they kind of have their own affinities and their own brands. But I like what he said there. It's like, hey, you may know us for Xbox, but if you trust Xbox, you love Xbox, then you should try out the Surface as well, or you should try out Microsoft Teams or whatever it may be.
I keep thinking Microsoft Teams now.
I know, exactly. Which I like that, right? Because I've always wondered, well, I don't think Meta should be all over Instagram. Like, who cares if the consumer thinks they're two separate brands? You're going to make the revenue on the back end anyway. I don't think we care that Dasani is part of Coca-Cola. There's different times when that makes sense, I think. But I think when it comes to Microsoft, I totally agree with him where it's, yeah, we may have a stranglehold on the gaming community with our Xbox product, but how do we leverage that for the greater good of Microsoft? Not just to make more money or to get more affinity with the brand, but because if you trust us and love this, we have other stuff that you'll probably trust and love as well.
Absolutely. And I really loved how he is just a true social nerd. Like he's one of the OGs, and I just have to respect all of our fellow OGs.
By the way, we say nerd, we say geek out, and those are all very positive terms in our industry. So
they're terms of endearment.
Exactly. And I love what he talked about too, kind of that, how do you create more appointment view content, if you will, when it comes to like, can you do a panel followed by a drop? Man, I think a lot of products out there can do those custom products, even if you only drop 10 custom cleats, right? If you're an NFL team or you're an Adidas or a Nike or whatever, after you interview one of your stars, I think there's so many areas there. And again, this may be somewhat anecdotal, but so much stuff is instant gratification, binge watch. I want it now. That if you have to wait for stuff, and you and I talked a little bit about the Andrew Scholl's comedy special that dropped recently. I think it was a 7-day event. It went live at midnight. It was a watch party. People were tweeting all in real time, and it felt different. It felt special, almost like the old Chris Rock specials on HBO, instead of just like, oh, it gets uploaded to Netflix, and whenever you have time, figure it out, which was part of the brilliance of that marketing strategy. But I love this idea. If you're in social, how do you create those events that are more, hey, it's happening now and then it's going to go away, or it's happening now, we're not going to re-release it for a week or 24 hours. So I do think us marketers should think a lot more in those realms. All right, so there you have it, episode 90. Thanks as always to both Katie's, KDO and KG, for all their help. Thank you so much to Judah for the connection, to Lance Trube over at Microsoft Store, and thank you to you, the listeners. Hope you guys check us out. KG and I were just talking about this, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, video, audio, we got you covered all those. So wherever you may be listening, thank you for taking the time, and make sure to help us out. Rate us 5 stars on iTunes so more people in our industry can get the value. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time on episode number 91. This has been another edition of the Business Social Podcast. My name is David Brickley, and it's all been powered by STN Digital.